This is Ed Pecky with the Americans in Wartime Experience. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Mr. Edward Jacobs in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and we are going to talk about his father, Edward Jacobs. Sir, what is your full name and where were you born?
Edward James Jacobs III. I was born in Oakland, California.
And Edward James is your father?
Correct, he is the junior.
Okay. And what branch did he serve in?
He served in the United States Navy.
Was he enlisted, commissioned, or drafted?
Actually, I have the honor of holding the same rank as he was when he was killed in action. So he was a commander. He did serve in the tail end of World War II as an enlisted sailor, an aviation mechanic, and that's where he got his start.
And so he started in World War II?
At the tail end of it. So in 1946, they were still doing the, they still hadn't formally declared the end until later in that year in December. So he was still awarded the World War II Victory Medal. So he did his 4 years from 46 to 50, and then went to college at Washington State University, got his degree, and then was commissioned in the United States Navy and went to aviation officer candidate school down in Pensacola, Florida.
Do you know why he entered military service?
He just loved the discipline about it, the service to the country. He was always a very outdoors, very interactive person up in Washington State. So he was driven to it as something he felt he should do. And I'm sure with his uncles and his relatives that had served during the war, hearing the stories and the dedication and the sacrifice that they made during that time period in the 40s was drove him to that decision.
So like that legacy sense of duty and being drawn to it.
Yes, in fact, that's where most of the servicemen and women today, they have the connection, either somebody that in their family or somebody they know has served and that has kind of affected them in some general way to serve.
And you know what his rate was at the time when he was deployed over to Vietnam?
He was a squadron pilot or squadron commander of a heavy photo reconnaissance squadron. He was stationed out at Jacksonville, Florida with VAP 62. The det was to work with VAP 61 over in Vietnam, and so he was in charge of that detachment that went, so he was a squadron commander for that specific purpose.
What kind of aircraft would that have been?
That was an A3D. McDonnell Douglas aircraft that was converted in the 50s from a medium nuclear strike bomber to a reconnaissance aircraft. So it was one of the heaviest aircraft in the 60s to land on a carrier. And
what carrier was he attached to a certain carrier, or was he land-based over there?
He was land-based. He was at QB Point, but there was other different bases that they would fly to or divert to during missions. So somewhere in Da Nang, maybe a carrier, if that was the case, if they had an issue with mechanics or fuel, then they have that off of Yankee Station in the north for that specific purpose. So there were alternates, but his main home base that he flew off on his last mission was out of QB Point, Philippines.
Do you happen to know if he made any landings or on any carriers, or took off from any specific carriers?
Well, not during that whole mission.
During any of his time over there?
Oh, I'm sure he did. Coral Sea, I believe, was a possibility on that. Like I said, with Da Nang, and there were a couple in the Philippines. Not Philippines, Thailand, but I'm not quite sure which air bases in Thailand they were.
And how long had he been serving in Vietnam before the incident that would have him be MIA-KIA?
I think it was, let's see, he got there in April, so from April to August, about, what was that, 5 months? around that time frame.
And how was your family notified about his status?
We had, from what my mother had told us, was that two gentlemen, an officer from the squadron and a chaplain, came to the door. She saw that and knew immediately what that meant, so she kind of rushed us kids into the back room so she could take that visitation. So that's when we were notified. Again, I don't remember because I was only 2.5 years old, but from listening to my siblings and what they experienced, it was a shock. Of course, they came in later after they notified, because there were organizational gear, certain records that the military needed to retrieve, and they came in and retrieved those within the week following that notification.
Obviously a difficult conversation to have with your children. And you not remembered, in speaking with your siblings or your mother, how does that conversation go? If you've talked about that.
From my understanding, what was said was that she had mentioned to us that he was not coming home, or at least to my older siblings, that your daddy is not coming home. And within 2 weeks, she had packed up from Jacksonville and relocated back to Pensacola, Florida. So I think the big purpose of that movement was, you have 7 kids, a lot of them are very young, and that support network was her mother and father and brother and sister were from Pensacola, and so therefore that support network was available to her right after that. So she was able to kind of focus on herself as she needs to be, but able to have the support to where it was able to take care of us as was needed.
Having a loved one, family member, listed this way, it takes a heavy toll on the family. How has that affected your family through the years?
That's a really, really good question. With so many in one family, everybody reacts differently. And I really don't want to speak on behalf of my sisters and brother on how they felt. I can tell you how I felt. And honestly, one of the first memories as a child was walking into a naval building in Pensacola, walking up the stairs to the second deck, down this long hallway. It was me, my brother, and my mother were the only ones there. And walking into, I can't remember the admiral's name, but walking to the aviation admiral's office, and there were 3-4 medals laying on his table. And they were to be awarded to the sons of my father. And so he awarded the medals posthumously to us. Again, I was just very tiny, so wound up walking on his desk, knocking a few things over. But that's a hard memory to begin your life with. Sure. Is the loss of your father and getting,
right, and not fully understanding really what it meant.
No, because in honesty, I didn't have that relationship with that bond yet. That's something really you develop over several years, and being only 2.5 at the time, it was difficult to understand the reason behind these ribbons and medals and why we're there. Other than that, yeah, my father's not coming home, but even that I wasn't able to kind of take into account.
And the natural question for a 2.5, 3-year-old is why, and even the answer wouldn't make sense.
Correct. So, I mean, I grew up in that time, not really kind of fitting in. trying to, kind of, because I had my sisters and my brother really to kind of lean on. So at school in the early years, just really not really associating with other kids. I remember coming home when I was 7, and that's when Operation Homecoming was occurring in '73 with the POWs flying back in, and I would rush home to see, hopefully, that maybe they made a mistake and my father would be walking off the plane, but of course he never did. So again, that's something that you have to kind of, you're hoping, and then it doesn't occur. So that's you revisit that loss
Right.
time and time again as the years go through, and you reflect. Well, this special event's happening. This, I'm graduated from elementary school, going to moving up to high school, or getting married, having kids, and not having him available to enjoy that celebration. So it's difficult to know there's something missing your whole life, and nothing's really available to fill it. So, yeah. So for my perspective, my sisters may have, and my brother may have a different experience, different take on it, but that's mine.
So what, if you can, if as much detail as you know, what were the circumstances that led to your father
Being shot down? Dave definitely has that down pat on his brief. So it was, there was, well, that's the thing too, is getting mixed information, mixed signals, and even growing up hearing different things from relatives and from my mother, what she received. So it was, one situation was it was over land, another one was over water, another one was where my grandmother had called my mother maybe about 8 years after the incident, and could sworn that Jim called her on the phone late at night from Vietnam, and when he said "Mom," he hung up, or the phone went dead. My aunt was in California, Aunt Jeannie. Her husband was serving, and she came home one day and found the door open and a letter that she received from Jim. She was going to open and read that afternoon. It was burned in the fireplace. So, I mean, there's just very different things and different stories that came out over the years. The last thing my father said to my mother when he left was, if anything happens to me, don't ask questions. And I think that was just something that was, at that time, the government was really stressing not to put, if he happens to be a prisoner of war or happens to be missing in action, in danger. So for him, they conducted a night reconnaissance mission over North Vietnam, flying through, or flying past Han Mai Island, and was going to then go inland on the Vietnam territory and then head north, and they were supposed to test some infrared equipment out. And of course, as they were approaching the shore past Han Mai Island, they took fire. Possibly, well, that's what we're assuming is one of the possibilities. And the aircraft and the carrier that was tracking them lost the signal. So there's possibilities that the altimeter may have malfunctioned and they went lower than expected and hit the water, or they did take anti-aircraft fire and went in from there. So it's when you have those types of cases where it's missing in action, body not recovered, over water, it's anybody's guess until you actually find that aircraft, and then you can kind of make an assessment if anything's left to make an assessment on.
Sure.
So it's just there are different stories, different things that led up to it. I think really they put together a kind of better assessment with talking with the other officers that were in the squadron at the time and kind of getting their pieces of information that we never had the opportunity to hear. So it was, I think, and still, it's still anybody's guess of what actually happened to the plane with regards to that.
So if I understand correctly, there's no eyewitness to this.
None, because
it's just it goes off the radar, and have they ever found the plane?
No,
Okay.
no. Through Mr. Huffman's research, we possibly tracked it through the last signal given, at least a proximity of where it's at, possibly 3 to 3.5 miles off of the coast of Vietnam, just southwest of Han Mai Island. So probably about in the depth of 70 to 90 feet of water. So that's a possibility. I mean, it could be farther, who knows? But there's always a starting point, and that gives you a starting point. We did happen, and can I mention this? It's very interesting how things kind of fit together. So we grew up in Pensacola after my mother moved there, and I think around 2006. Just going online, doing, especially trying to find some more stuff about the case and everything. Mr. Dick Stover, who was in the squadron assigned at QB Point, reached out, or I think my sister reached out to him, and he connected with her on this and provided photos and what he was doing with that mission, because he was part of that mission. And so he was on that aircraft doing some testing and equipment checks with the crew so that they could run this infrared new equipment on that mission. And he wound up taking one of the last photos of the aircraft on the evening of that flight. He only lived 3 miles from us in Pensacola. So that was, who's to say, what when you ask something, how that connection is going to come about. So it's it's just very interesting to meet these gentlemen and know that they knew my father.
There's that connection.
There is, and another one was when I was in high school. My Navy junior ROTC instructor flew with my dad. I didn't. He saw my name on the first day when I was a freshman in high school and turned completely white. And I didn't know why until he took me off to the side later that day and said, I flew vigilantes on the same area and carriers and went through training with your dad. So it was a really, it was a great experience for me that some of the families don't get to experience, because I got to speak with a fellow airman, a fellow pilot who trained with my dad and flew in a different aircraft, but knew him very well, and I got to hear different stories about him that I probably never would have heard if I didn't meet him.
It's such a small world, just being not close to not just one, but two.
Exactly. So it's, I don't know, as they say, God puts people in your path for certain reasons, and I think that's one of those. So I had mentioned earlier about hoping and feeling that loss, but you also get something in return. You can close some of those questions because you get to speak to folks that have those answers, and so it's kind of an ebbs and flow process through that whole thing. And I'm lucky to have met those gentlemen and be able to get that information.
Absolutely. Do you know what, if any, measures the U.S. government has taken to try to find the aircraft or find the spot or find out any other information about what happened?
Well, the DPAA has over years opened up the cases and have sent notifications to my mother with regards to the case, what they found, the interviews, but really nothing came about on any significant progress. So the case is still
Right.
undone. So it's that's interesting. You should say that, because if our relationships become more better with the Vietnamese government, who knows what can open up. Now, if that does come to fruition with regards to, we can get to some of these coastal regions and start looking at, because he's not the only one that's over water case. There's quite a few, and there's quite a few within that region of Han May Island. It's what is the priority DPAA is putting on that. If we do have that relationship and we are able to get in there, where are they going to go to first? What are their priorities? Or do they even have that even thought about yet? So that's questions still waiting to be answered.
So to your knowledge, has the Vietnamese government or anyone over there attempted to go to these areas and try to find anything?
They've not necessarily find anything, but to see if there is reason to go to those locations. They have. DPAA has questioned and has set up interviews with the North Vietnamese officers who were on station at those locations. It's what is fact, what's not, because memory gets a little bit clouded as time goes by, and so really what is going to take you to that next step. But they have tried. It's just, look how many cases are out there. So it is trying to go with the case that has the best possibility of retrieval, and sometimes over water doesn't give you that option, because it is more difficult. It requires different equipment, requires different skill sets to do that, and especially with the area in which you're operating, permissions to go into those areas. So that has a lot of impact on when that's going to happen, and how it's going to happen.
So you're in Virginia Beach this weekend for a reason. Can you talk a little bit about the organization that you're here for and here with, and what they do?
So the POWMIA Association Foundation, and this is for the families. So this is the regional meeting that was put on for the families in this. I'm not from this region. I'm up in the New England area, but because my sister is part of this organization here, and they are putting this weekend event on, I registered to join the foundation through this region. So that's why I may live elsewhere, but I'm part of this region, and I came down for this too. And this is the first time I've done this since 1995. And the only reason why I did 1995, it just happened to be in the city I was at that time. So it's just, certain things have happened, with kids, with getting married, being transferred from location to location, with the military. It's hard to try to break away, but now it's easier because all the kids are gone. They're out on their own. And I'm winding down to where I have more time now to devote to this, especially when it's being pursued as it is with my younger sister, Jeannie, who has really taken this on as a passionate love to not just find out what happened to my father, but also what happened to them all. And so it was a privilege and honor to be able to come down here and share my thoughts and my story and my experiences with others, because I think it helps bring a togetherness. I think one of the best things that came out of this weekend was that you had the children because my father wasn't alone.
Mm.
His navigator, Lieutenant J.G. James Savaki, and then his communications chief, Ronald Boyce Clare. This was the first time the families were together in one place since the incident occurred in '67. So we got the chance to interact, meet each other, and they were able to see some photos of their relatives they've never seen before.
Mm.
And we were able to share stories that we didn't hear about before.
Right.
So it was, I just wish my mother was here for that. She passed away 10 years ago. I know she would have loved to have met the families and said hi and talked to them.
I'm sure.
Yeah, so.
What are some of the things that the National League does for you, or services that they provide for the families?
Well, that's interesting. So I've learned quite a bit about the National League now, not really having been involved as I should be, and I that's my fault for not pursuing that. But it's from day one. I mean, from the first day here, they're like, do you have this? Do you have, what about, have you checked on this service? This, you're authorized, you have this benefit available to you. So it's that networking that they provided. One thing that I'm so happy I came here, besides meeting the family, was that all my sisters and my brother can get issued a Gold Star ID card from the local base in Pensacola, and they can actually now not have to wait for me to come down there to take them onto base to visit my mother's grave and my relatives' graves, that they can get this Gold Star ID card issued by the base as being a Gold Star family member, and now they could go on themselves and do that. I did not know that even existed.
Right. So a lot of avenues that you didn't even know about, all of a sudden you're getting this wealth of information, these resources.
Yes, and I don't know, I'm not pointing fingers or blaming anybody, but I wish, there's some things where I grew up in the non-social media age, so I don't really go on a lot with that. I still do a lot of stuff by mail. And so having gotten, like, these are some of the things you're authorized to receive, or the benefits you're able to have would have been, something that I would have loved to have known a while back.
Have you had an opportunity or a desire to go over to Vietnam, or to maybe the area where he was shot down, or has that been something, have you been able to do that or wanted to do that?
Well, I'm in the military, so
Yeah.
so I'd have to get permission for that one. I've had mixed feelings about that, but the more I learn and the more I speak to other families, and the more I hear about their experiences for those that have gone, eventually, yes, I would love to go over there, whether it be to go to that location where his plane could possibly be, or just to go over there and experience the people, the culture of that part of the world that he was experiencing, and just, I don't know if it'll give me closure like some of the veterans,
right,
it might, or some of the other family members it might, but it would definitely give me better knowledge of the overall experience and I guess the feelings that I felt growing up,
right,
with that, not really understanding why things happened the way they did.
Absolutely. So after today, you're going to get a copy of this interview. So let's say your 10th generation grandchild one day is going to watch this interview about your dad. What's one thing you would like the future and future generations of your family to know about your dad?
That's a very good question. That he loved his country. He loved the military. He loved serving. He loved his family. We talk about, as an instructor to junior officers, I talk about balancing the stool. The military is part of it, but your family is the other part. That you have to really make sure that it's never going to be completely imbalanced. One's going to be longer than the other, but that you do make sure that both are taken care of as equal as possible. And I think he did that. He always was about the family, making sure that we took care of each other. And for the generations coming ahead, I would say support each other, love each other, talk about, don't keep anything inside. If something's troubling you, throw it out there, whether it hurts somebody's feeling or not, because the more you keep it inside, the more it can cause problems later on down the line. And I think his dedication, his love for the family was really what leaves a indelible mark on me.
Well said. Is there anything else you would like people to know about your dad?
I heard he was a jokester. He loved to play jokes a lot, but he also loved taking his 8mm film cameras and pictures of everything. So the ones we do have are mainly of everybody else, but him. And I think in a couple of shots we do see him in the background when somebody else is taking the camera. But he was definitely all about doing things organized, the military way. Make sure everything was kind of spit and polish, as we say, but he enjoyed the fun aspects too. I think when off duty, yeah, he was off duty. Play hard, work hard, right?
Amen. Well, on behalf of the Americans in Wartime Experience, I'd like to thank you for sitting down and speaking with us today. I'd like to thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
And thank your dad for his.
Oh, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.